And then I am going to share my screen. All right. So I'm going to go here and show you this PowerPoint of our project. Okay, so our next project is called Notan, or another word for it is expanded square. So Notan is a Japanese term that means light and dark harmony. So this is an example of a Notan, or an expanded square. You can still see the square, and you can see how pieces were cut out of this black square and then just flipped over and put on the outside, kind of like a shadow, if you want to say that, or a mirror of that piece. You can see how some of them have been manipulated as a whole form, like this triangle, right? The whole form has just been cut out. But for instance, this kind of zigzag form here has been cut into in the black part, and then that put over onto the white side to show that contrast. So this becomes kind of a line, just like this is a line, but yet you see this shape and this shape are in, but they're opposite. So you want to make sure you can cut things out of the middle of your shape, but you're going to put them back onto the black area. So instead of the white area. Let me show you some more examples of that. So they tend to be a little abstract, but you can also put in some realistic kind of images. You know, there's the sun here and this tree. And this one is a little bit more complicated. A lot of this interior things that were cut out have been just put around the sides of the piece. So it's not necessarily mirroring what it is. The wave here does mirror it. This fish, this kind of like seaweed looking thing here, the crab, that's all mirroring this little circle right here. But you can see like this fish was cut out of the center. This fish was put down here. This circle became the sun up here. So there was a lot of additional add-ons to that particular one. Here's a student work. Here's a student work where you can see the cuts, just, you know, they're not perfectly cut, that's fine. But you can see how, you know, this was cut out as one shape, and then the interior was cut out so that it kind of mirrors here and here, and then this middle shape was put back into the black area. Oops, sorry. Oh, I jumped ahead. Here we go. Okay, so, and these shapes, a lot of them have this kind of interior lines. So this is one continuous shape, and these have this interior shapes cut out that show you. Okay, here's another one. The square is still there. It's kind of askew a little bit, but the shapes follow. You know, this shape was cut out and put over here. This shape was cut out and put over here. This particular piece has a lot of movement in it. So here's another one. These shapes cut out, mirrored over here. Some of the interior parts of those black shapes were cut out and put back into the circle. And, you know, it has a lot of zigzags. There's a fair amount of black in the center, but what you want to avoid is having a lot of black space in the center. So you don't want to just go around the edges. You want to cut into the center of the square. For those of you who don't have a lot of supplies, I'm showing you this. This isn't truly a Notan because the square is not really incredibly expanded. This is a rectangle, but this dragon was cut out of this paper and then flipped over and put over on this, and there's just contrasting green and yellow paper. So there's a possibility in case you need to do that. Here's another one. You don't have to use black and white. It's just as long as there's contrasting colors so that they stand out. Here are the directions. So I did post this on your Schoology. I'm going to adjust it a little bit because if folks at home are using construction paper, you might not get a 9-inch square if you have 8.5 by 11 paper. So I'm making this an 8-inch square. And then, so what you want to do is choose the paper. So you want contrasting paper. If you only have 8.5 by 11, you may want to take a color that you're going to use and get a couple of pieces and kind of tape them together so that they are larger. You can use tape, but make sure the tape is on the back of the paper. You don't want to have the tape on the front and then kind of be competing with the tape lines. So you want to lightly draw your design from the edges to the center of the square. You want to think of different shapes. You want it to look kind of interesting, so you want to make sure you're kind of following through on that. And you do not want to cut off the corners. So we are retaining the square, so you don't want to cut any corners. So you don't want to throw any of that black paper away. You're going to use the entire thing. Whatever is left over from what you cut out will be pasted down into the center of your bigger piece of paper. So you're going to cut out those shapes, you're going to flip them over, you're going to have them mirror the shape on the inside and on the outside, and then you're going to glue it down to a bigger piece of paper. So here at school, I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to show you what I did here. The way, so I have this 8x8 piece of black paper, and I started drawing with a white pencil on here. If you don't have a white pencil, you can certainly use a regular pencil. You'll be able to see it. For my purposes here, if I drew with a regular pencil, you may not be able to see it through Zoom. So I wanted to use the white to show my shapes. So really all I did was just start drawing, making sure that I'm not using any of the corners and that I'm cutting into the middle of my paper. And I might cut out some interior of this, and I might do that a couple of times. So I'm kind of at the point, if you can see this, where I've used a lot of this paper. So now I'm at the point where I'm going to start cutting out shapes. And then I have this larger 16 by 16 piece of paper that I'll be gluing it down on. So I have that, and then I'll be cutting out the shapes. So it's a relatively simple project. There's not a lot of I don't know, you know, it doesn't have to be very confusing, or it doesn't have to be very overly designed. So you're going to do that. So if you're at a loss of supplies, I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm going to show you that you can do this on Google Draw. Let me get rid of this. And I'm going to have a couple that I started. So you can see how I've started to do those. Here's another one. And here's another one. These are just all examples that I was showing during class. And I'll show you how to start. And I'll put up the directions in Schoology for Google Draw. So I'm just learning this, not used Google Draw a lot. So I'm still a little, you know, beginnerish with this. So you'll have to bear with me. So the first thing I want to do is pick a shape. I'm going to go for a square. So I'm going to throw that in here. And I'm going to make a square. And I'm going to make it black. I'm going to make sure that there's no lines around it, so those will be transparent. And there's my black square, just like my black square piece of paper. Then I'm going to go to the polyline tool, and I'm going to use that to start to cut shapes into my black square. So remember how to use this. We use this with the mosaic project. So here's my shape. Remember, your shape has to connect to become a shape. I'm going to use my paint bucket to make sure it's white and make sure my lines are transparent. And there you have it. So, oops, get this. I have to go back to my arrow tool. I want to make sure that there's these squares around my shape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it and then I'm going to paste it. So it's giving me a second shape. Oop, I don't want to move my square. So I'm going to grab this second one. I'm going to move it up here. I'm going to change the color to black. Make sure the lines are transparent. And then under arrange, I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to flip horizontally, but that's not quite right. So I'm going to go ahead and flip vertically, but that is correct. So I can line up the bottom here, just move it around, make sure they're kind of lined up on the edge, and voila. Here is my shape cut out of my black square. So I would go around and continue to do that throughout this entire piece. So you can choose to do paper or you can choose to do the Google Draw. It's up to you. The one thing that I want you to be aware of is whether your composition is symmetrical or asymmetrical. So that's something that you're going to have to, when you submit your final piece, you're going to have to mention, here is my asymmetrical, here's my symmetrical. You guys will have to decide. So that being said, I'm going to get Michael started here. And I, will be here. If you have questions, I will put up the directions for the Google Draw Notan. And I think that we could do this in 2 days. I know some of you are still working on your animals, but I think this is a relatively simple project that we can get done and then hopefully move on like next week with something a little more complicated. I mean, right now I'm a little concerned about getting everybody's supplies. So I'm trying to keep things doable for you guys at home. All right, anybody have any questions? We good? All right, I'm gonna stop this recording.